Commander Velik stood before the holographic display, watching his fleet burn. Red icons blinked across the screen, each one representing a ship that would never return home. The battle for Tarvos Prime was going badly, and everyone in the command center knew it. "Sir, the eastern defense line has collapsed," his communications officer reported, her voice tight with fear. "The Zendari are pushing through. We estimate 3 hours before they reach the civilian evacuation zones." Velik's four-fingered hand clenched into a fist. 3 billion people lived on Tarvos Prime. 3 billion souls who trusted the Kelrath Empire to protect them. He had sworn an oath, just like every officer in this room, to defend the innocent. But oaths meant nothing against the Zendari war machine. The Zendari Collective was unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced in living memory. They were a hive mind. Thousands of individual creatures controlled by a single consciousness. They didn't negotiate. They didn't retreat. They simply consumed every world in their path, turning the populations into more soldiers for their endless army. "Send every available ship to the eastern sector," Velik ordered. "Pull them from the northern blockade if you have to. Commander, that will leave the orbital stations undefended." "I know." Velik's voice was heavy. "But if we don't stop them at the evacuation zones, it won't matter. Do it." As officers rushed to relay his commands, Velik's second-in-command, Captain Morath, approached. The older Kelrath scales had turned gray with age, and his eyes carried the weight of too many wars. "This reminds me of the old stories," Morath said quietly. "The ones my grandfather told me when I was young." Velik glanced at him. "Not now, Morath. I don't have time for legends. The stories about the Deathworlders," Morath continued, ignoring the rebuke. "They say that when the galaxy faced its darkest hour, warriors from a world of fire and ice would come. Beings who knew no fear, who could survive wounds that would kill any of us." Velik shook his head. "Humans are myths, old friend. Stories to make children brave. If they ever existed, they disappeared thousands of years ago. We're alone in this fight." The holographic display flickered, and new red icons appeared. More Zendari ships had just entered the system. Velik felt his hope dying. They couldn't win this battle. The best they could do was buy time for the evacuation ships to escape with as many civilians as possible. "All ships, this is Commander Velik," he spoke into the fleet-wide channel. "We hold the line. No matter what comes through that screen, we hold. For Tarvos, for every man, woman, and child, depending on us, we hold." Acknowledgements came back from the surviving ships. Brave words from crews, who knew they were probably going to die. Velik honored their courage, even as his tactical computer calculated their chances of survival. The numbers were not kind. An alarm screamed across the command center. "Unidentified vessel just entered the system." The sensor officer called out. "Sir." It appeared from nowhere. No jump signature, no warning. "It's just there." Velik moved to the sensor station. "Where?" "A. Edge of the system, near the asteroid belt. Running analysis now." The officer's eyes widened. "Commander, the ship's design doesn't match anything in our database. The hull configuration is completely unknown. Could it be a Zendari vessel? A new design?" "No, sir. The energy signature is all wrong. Wait." A voice came through the speakers, speaking in perfect Kelrath language, though the accent was strange, ancient somehow. "Kelrath Fleet. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Human Space Vessel Liberty. We received your distress call. We're here to help." The command center fell silent. Every officer turned to stare at the speakers, as if they could see through them to the source of that impossible voice. "Human?" Morath whispered. "They're real?" Velik's mind raced. It had to be a trick, or a mistake, in the translation computers. Humans were legends. They weren't real. But the sensor data showed a ship unlike anything the Kelrath had ever built. And that voice had said the word that hadn't been heard in 7,000 years. "This is Commander Velik of the Kelrath Defense Fleet," he responded, choosing his words carefully. "Identify yourself and state your intentions." "Already did, Commander. We're human. We've been watching the galaxy from a distance. But when we picked up your distress signal and saw what the Zendari were doing to Tarvos, we decided it was time to step back into the light." "Permission to engage the enemy?" Velik looked at Morath, then at the holographic display showing his dying fleet. What choice did he have? If this was some kind of elaborate hoax, they were doomed anyway. If it was real, if humans truly existed and had come to help, then maybe those 3 billion people had a chance. "Permission granted," Velik said. "What are your capabilities?" There was a pause, and then the human captain's voice came back with a tone that might have been a smile. "We're from Earth, Commander. That should tell you everything you need to know." The Liberty appeared on the tactical display, accelerating toward the battle at a speed that made the Kelrath ships look like they were standing still. It was smaller than a Kelrath dreadnought, but moved with a grace that seemed almost alive. Velik watched as the human ship dove into the heart of the battle, and he realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe was about to change. The myths were real. The Deathworlders had returned, and the Zendari were about to learn why the ancient stories spoke of humans with fear and wonder in equal measure. The Battle of Tarvos Prime had just begun. The Liberty cut through space like a knife through water. On the bridge, Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display with calm eyes that had seen too many battles. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person knowing their job without needing to be told. "Weapons systems online," reported Lieutenant Amy Carter from her station. "Target acquisition locked on the lead Zendari cruiser. They're moving to intercept us." "Target acquisition. Target acquisition," Jake nodded. "Let them come. Ben, how's our reactor?" "Running at 80% capacity, Captain." Lieutenant Ben Parker called from engineering. "I can push it to 90 if you need more power. Save it for now. We might need it later." Jake opened a channel to the Kelrath fleet. "Commander Velik, we're going to draw their attention. Use the opening to regroup your forces and reinforce the evacuation zones." "Understood," came Velik's response. "But Captain Morrison, that's a suicide run. There are 12 Zendari warships in that formation." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "Commander, you really don't know much about humans, do you? Trust me. We've faced worse." He closed the channel and looked at his crew. "All hands. Battle stations. Amy, you're cleared to engage." The Liberty opened fire, and the Zendari learned their first lesson about human weapons. The kinetic accelerators didn't just punch through shields. They tore through them like they weren't even there. The lead Zendari cruiser shuddered as 3 tungsten rounds slammed into its hull at a significant fraction of light speed. "Direct hit," Amy reported. "Their shields are down." Launching plasma torpedoes. The torpedoes streaked across the void, adjusting their course mid-flight as the Zendari ship tried to evade. The weapons were smart, programmed with targeting algorithms that could predict enemy movements. All 3 torpedoes found their mark, and the cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash. On the Kelrath command ship, Velik watched in stunned silence. One human vessel had just destroyed a Zendari cruiser in less than 30 seconds. It had taken his entire fleet hours of sustained fire to bring down just 2 of them. "What are they?" Morath whispered beside him. "Deathworlders," Velik answered quietly. The stories were true. Down on Tarvos Prime, the situation was desperate. Zendari ground forces had broken through the defensive lines and were pushing toward the evacuation centers. Kelrath soldiers fought bravely, but they were being overwhelmed by the endless waves of biomechanical warriors that the hive mind threw at them. A transport ship descended through the atmosphere, its hull scarred from anti-aircraft fire. It landed hard in the middle of the evacuation zone, and the rear hatch dropped open. What emerged made the Kelrath soldiers stop and stare. Humans in combat armor ran down the ramp, weapons ready. They were shorter than the Kelrath, but there was something about the way they moved that spoke of coiled danger. Their armor was sleek and practical, covered in pouches and equipment. Each soldier carried enough gear to survive in any environment. "I'm Lieutenant Amy Carter," the lead human announced, her voice amplified by her helmet speakers. "We're here to hold this position until the evacuation is complete. Point us toward the enemy." A Kelrath officer, his scales torn and bleeding from shrapnel wounds, gestured to the east. "They're coming from all sides. We can't hold much longer." Amy looked at her team. There were only 12 of them. A single squad against an army. She grinned behind her helmet. "Then, we'd better make every shot count. Ryan, take your fire team and secure the northern approach. Lisa, set up a field hospital and start treating the wounded. The rest of you, with me." Sergeant Ryan Scott led 3 soldiers toward the northern edge of the perimeter. They moved quickly, finding cover behind the rubble of a destroyed building. Through his helmet's enhanced vision, he could see the Zendari forces advancing. There had to be at least 200 of them. "Contact," he said calmly into the radio. "Multiple hostiles. 200 meters. And closing. Engage at will," Amy's voice responded. Ryan's rifle spoke first, and a Zendari soldier dropped. His team opened fire, their weapons making sharp cracking sounds that were different from the Kelrath energy weapons. Each shot was precisely aimed, each bullet finding its target. The Zendari charged, expecting the defenders to break and run like the Kelrath had done. But humans didn't break. They had learned long ago on their brutal homeworld that running from predators only made you prey. You stood and fought, no matter the odds. A Zendari warrior made it through the fire and crashed into the human position. It was massive, twice the size of a man, with razor-sharp claws and armor plating grown from its own body. It slashed at Ryan, its claws catching his left arm and tearing through the armor. Ryan grunted in pain but didn't go down. Instead, he dropped his rifle, drew his sidearm with his right hand, and fired 3 times into the creature's face at point-blank range. The Zendari collapsed, and Ryan kicked it away. "Man down," one of his soldiers called. "I'm not down," Ryan growled, holstering his pistol. He pulled out a medical injector from his belt and slammed it against his injured arm. The pain suppressors and clotting agents kicked in immediately. Using a piece of debris and some tape from his kit, he quickly splinted his broken arm against his chest. "I'm still in this fight." He picked up his rifle with his good hand and kept firing. The Kelrath soldiers watching from nearby positions couldn't believe what they were seeing. A human had just taken a wound that would have sent any of them to the hospital, and he was still fighting like nothing had happened. Private Lisa Hayes set up her medical station in the center of the evacuation zone. Wounded Kelrath soldiers were being brought to her, and she worked quickly, her hands steady, despite the chaos around her. She treated a Kelrath with a sucking chest wound, using techniques and equipment the aliens had never seen before. "You're going to be okay," she told the soldier, in his own language. She had studied the Kelrath anatomy on the flight down. "Just keep breathing for me." The soldier looked at her with wide eyes. "You're human. You're really human." Lisa smiled, as she sealed the wound with synthetic tissue. "Yeah, we're real." Surprise. Above the planet, the Liberty continued its deadly dance with the Zendari fleet. Jake watched as his ship took hit after hit, the shields flaring with each impact. Warning lights flashed across his console, but his expression never changed. "Shields down to 40%, Ben reported from engineering. "Hull breach on Deck 3, sealing now." "Amy, status on the ground team." "We're holding," came Amy's voice, punctuated by the sound of weapons fire. "But we could use some air support soon." Jake made his decision. "Ben, divert all power from the port weapons to the engines. We're going down there." "Wreckhound." His crew didn't question the order. They simply made it happen. Because that's what humans did. They adapted, they improvised, and they never gave up, no matter how bad things looked. The Liberty broke away from the space battle and dove toward the planet's surface, trailing smoke and fire. Commander Velik watched it go, and for the first time in days, he felt something that had been missing from his heart. Hope. The Liberty screamed through Tarvos Prime's atmosphere, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. Inside the ship, alarms blared, as damaged systems struggled to keep functioning. Jake held onto his command chair as the vessel shook violently around him. Hull temperature critical, Ben called out from engineering. We're coming in too fast. I know, Jake replied calmly. But our people on the ground need us. Hold it together, Ben. Always do, Captain. The ship leveled out just above the city, its massive shadow falling over the evacuation zone. The Zendari forces below looked up, and for a moment, even their hive mind seemed to pause in confusion. Then the Liberty's guns opened fire, and confusion turned to destruction. On the ground, Amy heard the roar of the ship overhead and allowed herself a moment of relief. Air support has arrived. All teams, push forward. We're taking back this position. The human squad moved as one unit, covering each other with practiced efficiency. They had trained for scenarios exactly like this, fighting against overwhelming odds on hostile worlds. Earth had prepared them well. Every human soldier knew what it meant to be outnumbered, because their ancestors had survived by being smarter, tougher, and more stubborn than anything that tried to kill them. Ryan's fire team cleared building after building, their movements fluid despite the intensity of combat. Even with his injured arm, Ryan directed his soldiers with hand signals, his tactical mind working through problems faster than the Zendari could adapt. The hive mind was used to overwhelming opponents with numbers, but humans had spent thousands of years learning how to fight when outnumbered. A Kelrath officer named Torin fought alongside the humans, and he saw things that would stay with him forever. He saw a human soldier take a shot to the chest that should have killed him, only to get back up because his armor had absorbed most of the impact. He saw another human drag a wounded Kelrath to safety while under heavy fire, never once hesitating despite the danger. And he saw Ryan Scott, with one arm splinted and useless, still leading his team with the kind of courage that Torin had only read about in old stories. "Why do you fight like this?" Torin asked Ryan during a brief moment of calm. "You barely know us. This isn't your world." Ryan checked his weapon and reloaded. "Doesn't have to be our world. You called for help. And we answered. That's what decent people do." He looked at Torin through his helmet's visor. "Besides, we know what it's like to be on the wrong end of a genocide. We won't let it happen to others if we can stop it." In space, Commander Velik coordinated with the Liberty's tactical data. The human ship had shared its sensor information with the entire Kelrath fleet, and the quality of that data was stunning. It showed weaknesses in the Zendari formation that Velik's own sensors had missed. "All ships, focus fire on these coordinates," Velik ordered, highlighting 3 Zendari vessels. "The human ship has identified structural weaknesses in their hulls." The Kelrath fleet concentrated their weapons, and one by one, the targeted ships began to fail. It wasn't just the human ship doing the work anymore. It was the entire fleet working together, with information only the humans could provide. But the Zendari weren't defeated yet. Their massive dreadnought, the central node of their hive mind, finally entered the battle. It was 3 times the size of the Liberty, covered in weapons and bio-armor that had grown over its hull like a living thing. When it fired, 6 Kelrath ships died in a single volley. Jake saw the dreadnought on his display and knew what he had to do. "Ben, Demon 4 INES. Demon 4, I need everything you've got. All power to engines and forward shields. Captain, if we get that close to that thing, it'll tear us apart. That's the idea. Amy, get your team off the planet now." That's an order. On the ground, Amy heard her captain's voice and understood immediately what he was planning. "Negative, sir. We're still evacuating civilians. Amy, there's no time. That dreadnought is going to fire on the city. I'm going to stop it. But I need to know you're clear first." Amy looked at the thousands of people still waiting to board the evacuation ships, Men, women, children, all of them trusting the humans and Kelrath to save them. She made her decision. Captain, respectfully, we're not leaving these people. You do what you need to do. We'll be fine down here. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, pride and fear mixing in his chest. Understood, Lieutenant. Give them hell. The Liberty turned and burned toward the dreadnought at maximum speed. The Zendari ship fired, and the human vessel's shields lit up like a star. The first volley brought the shields down to 30%. The second volley dropped them to 10%. Shields failing, Ben reported, his voice steady despite the stress. Hull breaches on multiple decks. We're venting atmosphere. Seal what you can. Everyone else, grab onto something. Jake guided the ship with a pilot's touch, weaving through the incoming fire with desperate precision. Come on, baby. Just a little closer. The Liberty shuddered as another hit got through the failing shields. The bridge lights flickered, and sparks rained down from damaged consoles, but the ship kept going, driven by engines that humans had designed to never quit. Operated by a crew who didn't know how to give up. At point-blank range, Jake fired everything the Liberty had left. Kinetic rounds, plasma torpedoes, even the emergency escape pods filled with explosives. All of it hammered into the dreadnought's hull at a range so close that both ships were caught in the blast. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. Amy and her team stopped and looked up, seeing the brilliant flash in the sky. The Zendari dreadnought broke apart, its massive hull splitting into pieces that began to fall toward the atmosphere. But the Liberty was falling too, trailing smoke and debris. Liberty, come in, Amy called over the radio. Jake, respond. Static answered her. Down in the evacuation zone, Lisa worked frantically on a Kelrath child who had been injured in the fighting. Her hands moved with practiced skill, but her mind was on her captain and the ship that was her home. Around her, other humans continued their work, following their training even as fear gnawed at them. Ryan gathered his team. The dreadnought is down, but there are still Zendari forces in the city. We keep fighting until every civilian is safe. The captain bought us time. We're not going to waste it. The Kelrath soldiers who heard him straightened their backs and tightened their grips on their weapons. They had watched humans face impossible odds without flinching. The least they could do was show the same courage. In space, Velik stared at the debris field where two massive warships had just died. The Zendari fleet, without its command ship, began to falter. The hive-mind connection was disrupted, and individual ships started making mistakes, firing at wrong targets, colliding with each other. All ships, press the attack, Velik ordered. For Tarvos. For the humans who saved us. Press the attack. The Kelrath fleet surged forward with renewed determination. They had seen what one human ship could do. They had seen what humanity's warriors could accomplish on the ground. They would not dishonor that sacrifice by failing now. The Battle of Tarvos Prime raged on, but the tide had turned. The myths had become real, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Liberty drifted in orbit above Tarvos Prime, its hull torn and blackened but still intact. Kelrath repair ships surrounded it, like worried attendants around a wounded warrior. Inside the ship, emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow, and the air smelled of burnt circuits and melted metal. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his damaged command chair, a medical patch on his forehead and his uniform torn. He was alive. His crew was alive. And most importantly, the 3 billion people below were safe. That was all that mattered. Commander Velik's shuttle docked with the Liberty, and he made his way through the damaged corridors with growing respect. Every surface showed signs of battle damage, yet emergency repairs were already underway. Human crew members worked with a focused intensity that made Velik uncomfortable. They had just survived a battle that should have killed them all, yet here they were, already fixing their ship as if it was just another day. He found Jake on the bridge, directing repair efforts. The human captain looked up and smiled, despite his obvious exhaustion. Commander Velik, welcome aboard the Liberty. Sorry about the mess. Velik stepped forward and did something he had never done to another species. He placed his hand over his heart in a Kelrath gesture of deepest respect. "Captain Morrison, I came to thank you personally. You saved billions of lives today. You gave everything, including nearly your own ship and crew. I have no words adequate to express my gratitude." Jake stood and returned the gesture as best he understood it. "We did what needed to be done. That's all." "But why?" Velik asked, the question that had been burning in his mind since the battle began. "You don't know us. This isn't your war. Why would you risk everything for strangers?" Jake was quiet for a moment, looking at the damaged bridge around him. "Let me show you something, Commander. Follow me." They walked through the ship, and Velik saw what human vessels were really like. Every system had manual backups. Every door could be opened by hand if the power failed. Every section had emergency supplies that could keep people alive for weeks. The ship was designed by beings who understood that things would go wrong. And when they did, you needed to be able to fix them yourself. "This is our way," Jake explained as they walked. "Humans come from a world called Earth. It's a beautiful planet, but it tried to kill us every single day. Storms that could level cities, diseases that could wipe out populations, predators that hunted us when we were still learning to walk upright. Earth was a harsh teacher, but she made us strong." They entered the medical bay, where Lisa was treating injured crew members alongside Kelrath medics. She worked with calm efficiency, her hands steady as she patched wounds and administered medicine. "We learned to heal because we were always getting hurt," Jake continued. "We learned to adapt because if we didn't, we died. We learned to persist because giving up meant extinction. Every human you see here is the result of millions of years of surviving the impossible." Velik watched as Lisa finished treating a human engineer whose arm had been badly burned. The man thanked her, took some pain medication, and immediately went back to work on the damaged reactor. Velik's own people would have sent him to rest for days after such an injury. "You endure so much," Velik said quietly. "We do," Jake agreed. "But it's not just about endurance. It's about what we choose to do with our strength. A long time ago, we met another species called the Kael'thor. They were conquerors, destroyers. They taught us a hard lesson about what happens when you're not prepared to defend yourself. We lost billions of people before we finally stopped them." They reached the observation deck, looking out at Tarvos Prime below. The planet was scarred but alive, its cities damaged but not destroyed. "After that war, we made a choice," Jake said. "We could stay and be a part of the galactic community, or we could withdraw and make sure we were never vulnerable again. We chose to withdraw, to watch and wait, to see if the younger species could build something better than what we had seen. For 7,000 years, we watched. We hoped. And then you came back," Velik said. "The Zendari reminded us too much of the Kael'thor. We couldn't stand by and watch another genocide. We're not conquerors, Commander. We're protectors. It's what we choose to be, even though our nature and our history could have made us into monsters." Amy entered the observation deck, still in her combat armor but with her helmet off. Her face was tired but satisfied. "Captain, all civilians are evacuated. The ground team is returning to the ship. Ryan's got a broken arm and won't shut up about it. Lisa's exhausted. And Ben says the reactor will be fully operational in 6 hours instead of the 12 he originally estimated." Jake smiled. "That's Ben for you. Good work down there, Lieutenant. Just doing our job, sir." Amy noticed Velik and nodded respectfully. "Commander, your soldiers fought well. A few of them asked if they could train with us sometime. They want to learn human tactics." Velik was surprised. "They do? Yeah, I think we impressed them." Amy grinned. "Or scared them. Maybe both." Over the next few days, as the Liberty underwent repairs, Kelrath officers and crew members visited the human ship in growing numbers. They wanted to understand these beings who had stepped out of legend. They watched humans train in the ship's gym, pushing their bodies to limits that would hospitalize most species. They saw humans eating food that would be considered toxic to others, their digestive systems able to handle almost anything. They learned about human medicine, which assumed you would continue fighting even with serious injuries. Ryan became something of a celebrity among the Kelrath soldiers. He demonstrated human hand-to-hand combat techniques, fighting with precision, even though his arm was still healing. When asked how humans became such effective warriors, he gave a simple answer: "We train until we can't fail. We practice every scenario we can imagine, and then we practice the ones we can't imagine. When the real thing happens, our bodies just react. That's how we survive." Lisa taught Kelrath medics about human emergency medicine. They were amazed by how advanced it was. Designed to keep people alive in conditions that would be considered hopeless by other species. She explained it simply. On Earth, accidents happen all the time. People get hurt doing normal things. So we got really good at fixing injuries quickly. We had to, or we wouldn't have survived as a species. Ben worked with Kelrath engineers, showing them human ship designs. They were stunned by how everything was built with the assumption that it would break and need to be fixed quickly. Human technology wasn't always the most elegant, but it was reliable and repairable. News of the humans spread across the galaxy at light speed. Every species received the same information. The myths were real. The Deathworlders had returned. Some species rejoiced, seeing humanity as potential saviors. Others feared them, wondering if beings so powerful could truly be trusted. On the Kelrath homeworld, the High Council debated what to do. Some called for immediate alliance. Others urged caution. In the end, they decided to invite the humans to speak before the Galactic Council, to let them explain their intentions to all the species at once. Jake received the invitation and knew that the easy part was over. Fighting a battle was simple compared to politics. But humanity hadn't come this far to hide anymore. They would go to the council, they would speak their truth, and they would let the galaxy decide what came next. As the Liberty prepared to jump to the Kelrath homeworld, Jake stood on the bridge and thought about the future. Humanity had been alone for so long, watching from the shadows. Now they were stepping back into the light, and there was no going back. The stars awaited, and with them, humanity's next great challenge. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive structure built to hold representatives from dozens of species. Circular tiers rose up like an amphitheater, each level holding the delegates of different worlds. At the center stood a platform where speakers could address the assembly. Today, for the first time in 7,000 years, a human would stand on that platform. Jake Morrison walked through the halls of the council building with Amy and Ben at his side. He wore his dress uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp and clean, with the insignia of Earth displayed proudly on his chest. Around him, alien beings stopped and stared. Some with curiosity, others with fear. A few with barely concealed hostility. "Lots of eyes on us," Amy murmured. "Let them look," Jake replied quietly. "We have nothing to hide." Commander Velik met them at the entrance to the main chamber. He had been promoted after the Battle of Tarvos Prime and now wore the marks of a fleet admiral. He greeted Jake with genuine warmth. "Captain Morrison, the council is ready for you. I should warn you, not everyone is happy about humanity's return. The debate has been heated." "I expected as much," Jake said. "Change is always difficult. We'll just tell them the truth and let them decide." They entered the chamber, and thousands of eyes turned to watch them. The humans walked to the center platform, their footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Jake looked up at the assembled delegates and saw the full diversity of the galaxy. So many species, so many different forms of life, all gathered in this one place. The council speaker, a tall being from a species called the Torith, activated the translation systems. "The Galactic Council recognizes Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. You may address the assembly." "Endidus," Jake took a breath and began. Members of the Council, I stand before you today not as a conqueror or a threat, but as someone seeking to renew a friendship that was broken long ago. Many of you have heard the stories about humans. Some of those stories are true. Some are exaggerated. Today, I'll tell you the real story of who we are and why we came back. He spoke about Earth, about the brutal world that had shaped humanity. He didn't hide the violence of human history, the wars they had fought among themselves, the mistakes they had made, but he also spoke about how they had learned, how they had grown, how they had chosen to become better than their worst instincts. We withdrew from the galaxy 7,000 years ago after a terrible war with the Kale Thor. Jake continued. We were wounded, traumatized, and we needed time to heal. We watched you from a distance, hoping you would build something better than what we had experienced. And in many ways, you did. You created trade networks, peace treaties, systems of justice. You proved that different species could work together. A delegate from a species called the Vexer stood up. Yet you also watched as the Zendari conquered world after world. Where were you then? Where were the mighty humans when entire populations were enslaved? Jake met the delegate's gaze steadily. You're right to question us. We could have acted sooner. We debated it endlessly among ourselves. But we were afraid that if we revealed ourselves too soon, we would become the thing everyone feared. We didn't want to be saviors that became tyrants. We wanted you to have the chance to solve your own problems first. And when did you decide we had failed? Another delegate asked sharply. We didn't, Jake replied. When we saw what was happening at Tarvos Prime, we saw people fighting desperately to protect innocents. We saw Commander Velik and his fleet choosing to sacrifice themselves for civilians they had sworn to protect. We saw the same courage and determination that we value in ourselves. That's when we knew it was time to return, not as rulers, but as allies. An ambassador from the Zendari collective stood up. The creature was disturbing to look at, a mixture of biological and mechanical parts. When it spoke, its voice had the flat quality of something that wasn't quite alive. Humanity interfered in our legitimate expansion. You destroyed our command ship and killed thousands of our units. How does the Council justify this unprovoked attack? Before Jake could respond, Amy stepped forward. She pulled out a data pad and activated a holographic display. These are records we recovered from Zendari facilities on conquered worlds. They show experiments on living subjects, forced genetic modification, and the systematic destruction of cultures. Your expansion is genocide, and everyone in this room knows it. The evidence played across screens throughout the chamber. Species that had been silent now murmured among themselves. The Zendari ambassador tried to speak again, but the council speaker cut it off. The evidence is clear. The Zendari's actions violate every treaty and law of this council. You will withdraw your forces from all contested territories, or you will face united action from all member species. The Zendari ambassador's mechanical parts clicked and whirred. You cannot enforce this. You lack the strength. They might, Jake said quietly. But we don't. And we won't stand by while you continue to hurt innocent people. That's not a threat. It's a promise. Attack another civilian population, and you'll face us. And this time, we won't be alone. The Zendari ambassador stared at Jake for a long moment, then turned and left the chamber without another word. The threat was clear, but so was humanity's commitment. The council speaker called for a vote. The matter before us is simple. Do we accept humanity back into the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails? The debate lasted for hours. Some species supported humanity immediately, grateful for what had been done at Tarvos Prime. Others were cautious, worried about the power humans represented. Still others were simply afraid, unable to forget the old stories of Deathworld warriors who knew no fear. In the end, the vote passed, but it was close. Humanity was recognized as an official member of the Galactic Council, with the right to trade, travel, and maintain diplomatic relations with all member species. They were also invited to join the Mutual Defense Coalition, adding their military strength to the protection of peaceful worlds. After the session ended, Velik found Jake in a quiet garden outside the council building. The human captain sat on a bench, looking tired but satisfied. "You did well in there," Velik said, sitting beside him. "We did what we had to do. The rest is up to them." Jake looked at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear in the twilight. "This is just the beginning. You know, there will be more challenges, more conflicts. Some species will never fully trust us. Perhaps, but you've given them hope. My people will never forget what you did at Tarvos Prime. You saved 3 billion lives, and you asked for nothing in return. That means something." Over the following weeks, more human ships arrived in the galaxy. Not warships, but explorers, scientists, diplomats, and traders. Humanity was cautiously optimistic, ready to take its place among the stars once again. The Liberty remained as a symbol, its battle-scarred hull a reminder of what had been risked and won. Ryan Scott was promoted and given command of the first joint human-alien training program. Kelrath soldiers, who wanted to learn human tactics, could now train alongside humans who wanted to understand alien warfare. The first class began with 50 students from 6 different species. Lisa accepted a position at a major Kelrath medical facility, where she taught emergency medicine to doctors from across the galaxy. Her techniques saved lives that would have been lost before, and her gentle manner with patients showed that humans could be compassionate as well as strong. Ben became a liaison between human and alien engineers, working on joint projects that combined the best of both approaches. The first hybrid ships began to take shape in orbital shipyards, vessels that mixed human durability with alien elegance. Amy remained on the Liberty as its new captain. Jake had been promoted to admiral, and now commanded a small fleet of human ships working with the Galactic Defense Force. But the Liberty was Amy's now, and she wore the responsibility proudly. On the Liberty's bridge, Amy stood looking at the stars through the forward viewport. The ship had been fully repaired, its scars healed, but its spirit unchanged. Behind her, the crew worked with the same quiet efficiency they always had. They were human. They endured. They persevered. And now, they were no longer alone. A message came through from Admiral Morrison. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. We've received a distress call from the Meraxis system. Zendari forces are attacking a civilian station. Liberty, you're closest. Can you respond?" Amy smiled and sat in the captain's chair. Some things never changed. "Affirmative, Admiral. The Liberty is on its way. All hands, battle stations. Let's go remind the galaxy why they tell stories about humans." The ship turned toward the distant stars and jumped to light speed. Behind it, a dozen other ships followed, human and alien vessels flying together toward danger. The myths had become reality. The Deathworlders had returned, and the galaxy, for better or worse, would never be the same again. Far away, in the dark spaces between stars, the Zendari collective processed what had happened. The humans were more dangerous than predicted. They had allies now, growing numbers of species that would fight beside them. The hive mind calculated possibilities and probabilities, and began preparing for the next phase of the war. But that was a problem for another day. For now, humanity had won its place among the stars, and that was enough.